All right, let's jump on here and get some after dark instant reaction. Chris Marler is with us here. I'm Jim Dunaway. Chris is part of our Cover Crimson family. Speaking of our Cover Crimson family, covercrimson.com, $1 gets you all the content for the first month. See if you like it. Mick Gillespie and the crew is about to go live at covercrimson.com, covercrimson.com. They do that after every Alabama game, not just the ones that make your heart stop.
Oh my
Same
God.
thing happens at the barnauburn.com. After every Auburn game, you get that reaction from their loss today on this show for a short period of time. And then the barnauburn.com, you can go back and catch what you may have missed there. It's all brought to you by our friends at MyBookie, mybookie.ag. Promo code next round, one word, put it together. Promo code next round. You get a nice bonus on your initial deposit there. Okay, Marler, you hit me up here and you say, man, we got to get on and talk about this. So give me instant reaction to what you just saw in Bryant-Denny Stadium tonight.
So pretty awful performance. I felt like for 2.5 to 3 quarters, and the game, the way it played out, it reminded me of a little bit of the South Florida game a year ago, but it kind of reminded me of that Tennessee game from the 2021 season, where it was like you were a huge favorite. Obviously, it's a rivalry, but you were a huge favorite, and all of a sudden you find yourself down like 14-7 in the first quarter. And every time you would answer, and you kept thinking they would just go away, then they didn't. And that game played out differently because both teams had offenses. Bama struggled tremendously on offense, and that was obviously not great. Honestly, Jim, I thought about this last week, and it felt I couldn't figure out how to actually say it out loud without sounding like an idiot. So I'm going to try it now. But the offense put up 63 points and 600 yards of offense a week ago. And it felt like I was still concerned with how they would be able to consistently drive down the field, because everything was in chunk plays and big explosive plays, which is great. But you saw tonight, it's you had a couple injuries in the offensive line. It was really bad, especially from the second quarter through the third quarter.
Yeah, it was never comfortable until, as Landmine Believer says, they put Pritchett in at right tackle, and then they started to move the ball. I don't know if I've ever seen one person called for as many holding penalties, and they missed a couple, to be honest with you.
Yeah, they did.
I don't know how that was a lot on 75 out there tonight, but finally they put Pritchett in, and it seemed to settle things down. At least you weren't going backwards, and boom, you get a big play on the third play, and then it was all over with. It was a blowout, 42-16.
Well, you kind of were going backwards. Also, that Wilkin Formby performance was about as close to Chris Capps as I've seen in 20 years. And that is not something I ever wanted to see again, ever. But yeah, I mean, at one point they had 5 straight offensive drives that resulted in negative 23 total yards. It just, I mean, and credit USF, because they just kept blitzing and kept blitzing and kept blitzing. But my goodness, it was frustrating to not see any kind of adjustments made for quite some time.
Yeah, let's bounce through some comments. Give me your instant reaction to these. Mark jumps in and says, hey, lots of struggle wins today in the top 25. Penn State struggled to win. Obviously, yeah. Auburn wasn't in the top 25, but they got upset majorly.
And they won't be this weekend either.
Yeah, Notre Dame got Notre Dame got upset. What'd you say about Auburn?
I said they won't be in the top 25 this week either.
Yeah. They will not. That's an interesting loss we'll get to in a second. Brett says a win is a win. Landmine Believer, like I just said, took Formby out, put Pritchett in, and things started to move a little bit. So tell me about the defense, because I want your reaction to the defense, because everyone's going to focus on the struggle to protect, the holding penalties, right, blah blah blah. But it did seem like most of the game, Kane Womack's defense was not very disciplined about staying in run lanes, especially when they were rushing the passers. Remember the old Tim Tebow? They would build that fence. They wouldn't really pressure all the way to him. They would just sort of bend it to where they would start to zooming in on him, but they would really not go right at him initially to keep him pinned in. They weren't doing that tonight for a long time.
Yeah, and you saw a couple times where there were several times where I thought they were about to break off a big play, and credit Bama because they limited most of those. But you also saw a couple, and luckily a few got called back, but you saw a couple that were like they just find a crease and all of a sudden spring free, and it's a huge gain. I thought the defense was outstanding for most of the night. They were consistent the whole time. I think they at one point USF was like 1 of 13 on third down. They ended the night 2 of 18 on third down. Now that being said, I know what the final score was, but at one point in the third quarter, at least, you could look at this game if you're being objective and say if they had a quarterback that was remotely accurate on wheel routes or anything downfield, like a third of the time or a quarter of the time, they probably would have been up by 7 to 10 points in this game because they had plenty of opportunities they just missed on.
Were you ever worried they were going to win, that they were not going to win the game? Was there a moment in time that you thought you were probably watching the worst loss timing-wise, maybe in Alabama history, on a night that you honored the greatest coach in Alabama history and named the field after him, and you were going to go out and lose the game to USF on primetime TV? That would have been a horrible way to bring in Saban Field.
I'm neurotic and irrational enough in general that there was at least one part or one point of the game where I figured that we might, just because the irony of what they were doing off the field, dedicating the field. But yeah, I'm old enough to remember the first Gene Stallings game of his era was a loss to Southern Miss. So there's been some bad ones over time. This would have been up there with one of the worst ones.
Hunter says, I've never agreed more with Landmine Believer than I do about this offensive line. But now you're off to Wisconsin, a road game, first one of the year, tough place to play, 11 a.m. start. And I would say if you go to the point to put Tyler Booker out to left tackle to play all night long out of position, I would imagine there is a belief. I'd heard initially that maybe Georgia was the target date on Caden Proctor. I would imagine the offensive line you saw at the end of the game is likely the one you're going to get against Wisconsin. Concern now moving to play a Big Ten team, not an American Conference team.
Yeah, I mean, and Wisconsin has struggled early so far this season, especially in the first week of the year. The thing that's weird about the Formby situation is that he played well all throughout like spring ball, all throughout fall camp, and like by all means, I know how it played out because Proctor got hurt in pre-games, but like kind of won the job at least because he played it the entire game, or at least for when the starters were in last weekend. I don't know if he just got confused because of what the defensive coordinator was doing in terms of like their blitz packages, because they blitz on every down. They blitz on every single down. And it was bringing like 5 or 6 guys. And it happened multiple times where you saw people that weren't just Formby get confused, but he was a noticeable weak link. And this was a problem you had a year ago, Jim. Like 49 total sacks allowed is the most in program history. It's the most of any team in the country besides, or any team in the SEC in the last like 15 or 20 years. They've got to get that figured out before they go on the road.
Yeah, I agree. And Wisconsin coming up this week. This is a Fire Dog. He says, as Saban always said, this was a teaching moment tonight. So you hope they get something out of this. If I say, give me the biggest positive in this game for you, other than just getting out of here with a win. And on the scoreboard, the nation, the folks that are just now finishing up watching Nebraska beat Colorado badly, and the folks that are finishing watching Tennessee beat NC State badly, they're going to look at 42-16 Alabama and say, man, that's pretty much what I expected it to be. I
think the biggest positive is that it's over, because that was, again, just not a very fun watch.
It was.
The defense, it has to be the defense. Like the front seven, really, I thought they stood out. Like the linebacker play, you knew was going to be elite all season, especially coming into the season. Like they're just so talented there. But like again, at one point you had held them to 1 of 13 on third down conversions. Like that is an offense that, with Alex Golish and the way he calls plays and like the success he's had in previous stops, they should be able to operate on a much more efficient level than they did against Alabama. So that is a positive, I think, from tonight.
Yeah. I would ask you about Milroe's play, but in all fairness, I thought he did about as good as he could do, except for that one big sack, because almost instantly he was running for his life all night long, it seemed like, right?
He threw the ball away, which is something we saw him struggle to do a couple times early in the season last year in taking unnecessary sacks. But yeah, I mean, it felt like he was running for his life, especially in the first half. Like it never felt like he had a pocket to step into at any point. So, I don't think, like, I'm sure that the social media reaction about Milroe is going to be how it always is, which is like completely flawed and not very accurate to how he played. I don't put a ton of that on Milroe because where were the mistakes that he personally made? Like, also, I don't know why they went under center. I don't know why they went under center on the 1 or 2 yard line. I haven't seen him do it all year in either two games.
I'll tell you why. Because all of us bitch like when you're down at the goal line, when you're on the 1 yard line, like we line up in shotgun, we start screaming, "Why are you in shotgun? Get under center and just fall forward." So that's what they were doing. Yeah, and fumbled. That's why a lot of people don't get under center, because you rarely take under center snaps and you get under there, and apparently it's harder than it looks on television, right?
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, like, it just was that part was it was concerning because it just felt like, man, with like 13 penalties, like the turnovers, and it felt like there was an extreme lack of focus for most of the game until like the fourth quarter. And that was very concerning.
MyBookie.ag promo code next round to get a big deposit bonus when you go in there. MyBookie.ag, they bring you our football coverage, post-game reaction coming up on our platforms from Kalen DeBoer in the locker room. Emily Grace McWhorter is there. You already got some Hugh Freeze post-game up on our platforms already after their loss earlier today. Give me a thought, because, again, we're not going to be here long. We're going to turn it over to the guys that cover Crimson. Give me a thought on what you saw with Auburn earlier today. That one just floored me. That surprised me. I thought Auburn would easily win that game and cover. Lance called it earlier on our morning show that he thought the best quarterback in the building was going to be wearing the Cal yellow and blue, and
that's
ended
crazy.
up being that case. Peyton Thorne did not look good today.
So, man, I tell you what, like, all the numbers, like, from a betting standpoint going into this, like, all I did an article about it this week for my other job, and we were talking about just like how bad this Cal defense has been. Like, this Cal defense was ranked like the third worst in the country a year ago in passing yards allowed, in passing touchdowns allowed, and in turnovers lost. Third worst in the country in all three of those categories. And they have been really bad in the first half of games, especially over the last two seasons. Like, a week ago, they played UC Davis, and they had 4 first downs in the first half, and were outgained like 220 to like 109 yards. Like, they were awful against an FCS opponent. And then they come all the way down to Auburn. You know, they're 4-15 on the road over the last 4 or 5 seasons. They come down to an SEC stadium. And, man, like, outside of that first drive for Auburn, they looked completely inept, just completely inept.
Zane, I knew this would happen eventually on an Alabama post-game show. All that fun they're having at practice, laughing emoji. You knew the music and everyone having a good time and being able to celebrate after a touchdown. Once you had a penalty-filled game like this, that would happen. Yeah. You know? You just knew it was going to happen.
Yeah, no more ice cream trucks pulling up anymore.
Yeah, what were the penalties tonight? I mean, I know it was double-digit for Alabama.
13 for 120.
13 penalties for 120 yards, 11 for South Florida. So we just saw a football game with 24 penalties. That was not an NFL exhibition game. That is mind-boggling.
It was awful. There was a stretch in the third quarter where I think there were 4 plays or 5 plays in a row that had at least one flag.
And a lot of times it was Alabama on the field, and it was on the right tackle. Okay, I want to do this for those that may be watching us for the first time. We're the next round guys, and also this is our buddy Chris Marler, who does a lot of things with a lot of different folks, including our folks at covercrimson.com. covercrimson.com. He's part of that family over there with Clint Lamb, Mick Gillespie, and they're over there right now. Stacey Blackwood, they're live right now at covercrimson.com. So when we shut it down here, go there. What now?
Just somebody, Evan Grimes, put $5 in the super chat and said Freeze wasn't involved in the game plan because he was recruiting.
Yeah, that was last year, right?
Yeah.
I haven't heard his post game. I know our great social media team has kicked a bunch up. I can't wait to go hear what he was talking about today, because he was the play caller, and they've got players at receivers. They just couldn't get it to him.
First drive was great. They looked great in the first drive, and then and again they were going up against the defense they should have had a lot of success against.
Well, I'm told Justin Wilcox is a well-respected defensive mind, and he brought that team to Auburn just like he did last year, and just like Todd Orlando did with USF. Fits for both of these teams. I'm glad both these series are over with, because they have not been good football games, either one of them. That one in Tampa last year was one of the hardest games I've ever watched, And for 3/4 tonight, it felt that way again in Tuscaloosa. The same as we got Cover Crimson over at the Auburn site, thebarnauburn.com, thebarnauburn.com. Just $1. Check out all the content. But if you go to the websites, you get a lot of free shows throughout the week as well. That includes the one Chris does a couple of times a week with Clint Lamb. And Clint's an amazing guy. He's in the post game right now, and he'll join Mick as soon as he comes out of the post game and gives you great reaction there. Okay, before we shut it down, give me one more thought on what you saw tonight and what you think happens to Alabama the rest of the season. Is this still a playoff team? Is this team going to drop in the rankings, much like Oregon did last week? What do you think happens moving forward for Alabama in the immediate future and long-term future?
So I don't care if they drop in the rankings. Like that's like the least of our concerns, I think, after what we just saw. But you got to find the consistency that you obviously haven't had through 2 games, and you obviously want to have something closer to the performance from week 1 when you go to Wisconsin. I think the biggest thing that like I'm looking towards, like, it has to be a wake up call. It has to be a wake up call. And I know that like this is a new era and a new, administration regime, however you want to play it or however you want to say it. Entire new coaching staff. But going on the road has been a big source of stress and some recent losses in the last 2 or 3 years under Saban. They have not been a good road team at all. And also the penalties on the road have been outrageous over the last 2 or 3 years. So I'm hoping that whole trend is bucked with a new head coach and new head coaching staff. But I don't know. It was really weird that in the third quarter they were interviewing Kalen DeBoer, and the lack of anger, emotion, whatever, like his just very relaxed demeanor, it threw me off tremendously.
Everyone's asking where Taylor is. She's not going to join us tonight. She's on a bachelorette trip. One of her best friends is getting married. She's at an undisclosed location, but I was in contact with her all day long, especially after I was so heavily on Auburn. And she gave me a couple of unique messages. I will not say let's just say she couldn't post what she texted me on social media like you did, Chris, or she would lose her account.
Lesson learned there.
Yeah. And then she sent me a few pictures of her starting to drink early before the sun sets at her location. And that's the way Little T handles the Auburn losses. She'll be back with us Monday in studio. We'll do Dunaway After Dark tomorrow night at 10 Central. And then we'll start Monday's 8-9 hours of continuous programming with Monday Morning Live when Tom Luganbill joins me. But I just want to say, man, thank you for jumping on.
Yeah, of course.
And I appreciate you and all the content that you put out all the time. I'm a big fan of yours. And a happy to score ends up looking 42-16 for the Tide. I thought we were headed towards a double dose of losses in our state here today.
Would have been honestly, that was the worst part. So we couldn't even enjoy the Auburn loss because of how stressful the first 3 quarters of this game was.
You still dating the young lady who used to go to Auburn? Does she kick you? Does she kick you in the teeth when?
No, she handled it. She's great. She's fantastic. She handled it well. I think she did maybe fire off one tweet at Hugh Freeze and then realized when she put the tweet out that she didn't tag him. So she went back and tagged him and said it with her chest. So that was something. So, yeah, I mean, she still hasn't lost a Twitter account, though. So that's where she constantly gets the win versus me.
Yeah, house divided is always fun when one wins, one loses. So luckily you're not on the couch. I like that. That. All right, man. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday night and weekend, and we'll see your content next week, okay?
Sounds good, brother. Talk to you then.
Okay, don't forget, right now, covercrimson.com, covercrimson.com. Head on over and check out Mick and the guys. They will be doing this deep into the morning hours. They'll go past midnight sometimes. So jump over there and do everything with Mick and the guys at covercrimson.com, covercrimson.com. They're over there right now live. So go check them out. We'll see you, folks.